My mom one time was telling me a story. Now, my grandpa, my mom's dad, he died just a few months before I was born. He died in 1962, and I was born. I think he died in April of 1962. I know it's 62. I think it was April. Anyway, I was born February of 1963, the following year. Anyway, so I never got to know my grandpa Pitzer. I heard a lot of good. My mom told me a lot of good things about him. And about 4 miles from the library, and this has been measured. I measured it. 4 miles from the library's parking lot to the driveway where my grandpa's store, his mom and pa store he ran, owned and operated. It's just 4 miles. It's right to the driveway of the house. Anyway, my grandpa ran that store back in the 50s. And mom said one time he went to lock up and go home. And he had, like a typical store, he had a bench sitting outside. And now back in those days, you didn't fear being robbed or nothing. Nobody bothered you. He had his money in a metal box. And it might have been before that. I think mom was a teenager. I think that's what she told me. Anyway, he had locked up, and him and mom got in the car to go home. And my mom said they got just a few miles down the road, and my grandpa realized that he forgot and left all that money in that metal box. Small, I don't know how big the box was, typical metal size, typical size. Anyway, of course, he had hundreds of dollars, he had a lot of money in that. And so they raced back to the store. And now you got to remember, it's sitting on the corner. This house still is. House is still there. I grew up there. Anyway, the house sets 10 foot off the road, and it's a four-way. It's a four-way stop. Anyway, it scares him to death. He's thinking somebody will pull up there and see that and take it. As he's real driving, he's driving fast, but he's driving safe. I mean, he's driving fast because he's got to get back there. He gets back to the store, his store. And that metal box is still there on the bench, yeah. Now, I don't know how the traffic was in the 1950s. But now, I grew up in the 1970s. Now, to me, traffic in the 1970s, to me, traffic was bad. Heavy, moderate traffic, just like you see today. Now, I suppose the traffic back in those days was probably just about moderate to heavy. My grandpa is real lucky. Of course, back in those days, nobody bothered nothing, but it was just the idea of that money inside that metal box sitting outside. Just the idea of that. But they get back there, and the metal box is still there on the bench. Boy, he got lucky, didn't he? Yeah, he just had his mind somewhere else, Mom said. They got in the car, going down the road, and my Uncle Carl was with them. That was my grandpa's brother. Now, I remember him a little bit. He died when I was 5 years old. I remember going to his funeral a little bit. And he had a tumor on his neck, cancer. Anyway, I think he was driving, going home. And when my grandpa realized he forgot his money, my grandpa made him, get on the passenger side, and my grandpa took over the driving. And, because he's wanting to drive faster. But I tell you what, Mom said when they got back and seen that money, they just started laughing. I mean, it was funny. It was, it's scary, all that money sitting there. It was inside a metal box. But, back then no one bothered nothing. But then again, it's money in a box. I don't care if it was 2,000 years ago. You just don't let something set like that. But my grandpa just had his mind somewhere else and just got in the car and forgot it. Oh my God. Yeah. I think my mom said he had several $1,000s in $100 bills sitting there inside that metal box. Right. 10 foot off the road. 10 feet. The house, I grew up there. The house is right on it's a four-way. The house was built 10 feet. I'm not making this up, folks. The house is that close to the road. It's that close to the four-way. The stop sign is in the yard. The house is 10 feet off the road. And my grandpa forgot and left that metal box with that money in there, sitting outside on the bench. Oh, Mom says when they pulled up there and seen that box there, and then my grandpa gets out of the car and grabs that box and opens the lid, hoping to God no one took the money and left the box there. But when he opened that box, seeing all that money there, man, my mom said you could see the total relief on my grandpa's face. Yeah, no kidding. I'll never forget her telling me that. Wow, the good old days, huh?